To those, I just want. Oh, sorry. So citizen comments, before we get to them, we are going to discuss the COVID protocols under 9A. So if you have any comments related to that, we are going to open up a discussion after we talk about that. So if you have anything related to that specifically, I'd appreciate it if you could wait until that segment of the meeting just to keep things going, because we have the 7 o'clock meeting as well. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. So moving on to presentation of school programs and FYI items. We have Michael.
Oh, yay! All right. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to share an update about the strategic plan. So we have some new faces in the crowd who haven't been here in the past couple meetings. So I wanted to give a bit of a background that Jackson Grammar School never had a strategic plan. And recently Conway created and adopted a strategic plan. And we had the option where we could have adopted it for Jackson, and we paused and said, well, a lot of Conway's strategic plan is wonderful. We'd like to go the extra step and make a strategic plan that's unique to Jackson that really speaks to the work that we're doing here at the grammar school. So we created a strategic plan committee, and we used the Conway plan as a template and looked at it and said, how do we want to adapt and adjust, and what could that look like? And the result of it, you all, when you were walking in, there are copies of it on the table. If you don't have one, feel free to go back and grab one. This is a draft of the strategic plan. It is assembled based on, I think at this point we've had 5 community touch points. We've had in-person listening posts, we've had virtual listening posts, we've had surveys, and now we've presented that to the board as a draft. And the next step will be at our next meeting to go into discussion around this with the hope of adopting it in the May meeting and moving forward. I welcome if you have considerations that you want to add to it. You're welcome to email me or anybody on the school board, and that will get to us. But that's the origin story behind the strategic plan. I hope that you enjoy it.
Like I just want to correct, I think we did adopt it wasn't a common plan, it was an SAU 9-wide plan. We did adopt that.
Yes.
So we did adopt that strategic plan.
Thank you for the clarification.
It's not that that was the first strategic plan that we technically had.
Yeah.
But as you said, that we wanted to kind of tailor it more for Jackson so that it made sense for us.
Yeah. And as you'll see, if you look at the strategic plan, each section is divided so that at the top you can see what the SAU-wide priorities are, which we are in sync with, and then below that in the table are the specific things for Jackson. Okay.
All right, moving on to old business, tuition contracts for the high school.
So, if I might, the cooperative committee was dissolved, and at the last SAU 9 meeting, it was agreed upon, and I've also received communication from SAU 13 that all of the parties would like to continue those conversations moving forward. So cooperative school district is off the table, but rejoining that committee to take a look at the different options, whether it's tuition agreements, reworking those, joint management agreements. So we'll start that process, and thanks for these folks, Jerry and Jen and Darlene, for sitting on that committee. But after all the elections at the different school boards throughout SAU 9 and 13, we'll reconvene and begin that process probably in May. So that's really the update at the broader scale related to the tuition contracts.
Thank you. Any instructional issues?
Nothing. You have it?
All right. Non-renewal, consider personnel actions, non-renewal of teachers.
If there's any question, it's basically the 1-year contract.
Motion?
Yeah.
Great. Business affairs, budget status report.
That just gives you awareness that where we are at the budget, obviously the tuition piece is going to be addressed later on with Bartlett, just because there were some adjustments that had to be made, and we'll get closer to the end of the year, you'll know how much we can anticipate to withdraw from the tuition trust fund. I don't know if there are any other questions on the status.
Okay, moving on to 9A. Kevin?
Yep, so, you know, yeah, COVID-related pieces, we've been through this process for 2 years. One of the things that we've done is follow the guidelines all the way through. And as an administrative team, we've talked about this in preparation of the day will come when masking will be optional and moving beyond that. So we've been talking about that. We weren't sure exactly when it was going to take place and how it was going to take place. And I've been pretty steadfast, and you folks have made those decisions as well, following the guidelines from DHHS and then CDC. So we're at that point now. And one of the things that has happened is school boards did make some decisions, and from the State Department and Department of Education, it's been local control over most of those times, except for when executive orders have come in. So most recently, last Wednesday, we received a technical advisory from the New Hampshire Department of Education, along with Dr. Chan and the Division of Public Health. And that came out, and it's very clear, and it says that the new guidance no longer recommends universal face mask use either indoors or in outdoor settings. And along with that was the caveat of once that goes into play, then there are other pieces. And part of that advisory says that if you do not make that move, you could be subject to violating Ed Standards 306, which is what we follow, right? That's my job, and that's your job, and that's our job, is to follow RSA's policies and the Ed Standards. So with that being said, a couple of boards have already made the decision prior to that, but they had put it out a week or two. And to be honest with you, we knew that it's going to be a kind of an uncomfortable period of time, one way or another, and a little bit of awkwardness that we've seen. But with the guidance and the technical advisory from the Department of Education, I would recommend following those guidelines so that you don't get yourself into a difficult jam, because now we're going against the guidelines and the recommendations. So we bring that forward to you folks. Jackson School Board has been pretty clear about any major changes take place at this level. And I would ask that you take a look at that and make some decisions so that Gail and the staff and the community can move forward. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay. So we also got our latest SAS reports in from this week. I asked Pam for them. I don't know if
Yes.
you had a chance, so.
All clear, we have no COVID.
We had 33
All the
people.
students that we tested, 33 students were tested, and there were no positives.
How many grown-ups in the building?
There was 23 students tested and 10 adults tested.
So it was 33.
Total of
so
33.
Including adults.
You
Yeah,
said how many adults
10,
and children?
23.
Thank you.
Yep. And they all came back negative.
Yep.
So, with that being said, we need to make a motion. I don't know if we want to entertain citizen comments at this time, and then we can make a motion.
I think as this board and the way that we've listened to our community, we've got a lot of folks in our community that have written us letters to ask us to please maintain the masking that we have really championed through the last 2 years pretty universally on this board. I know that I'm super disappointed that we we're asked to make a lot of decisions for a really long time in the best interest of our community. And then when it was time for us to continue making those decisions, we were told, you don't make the decisions anymore. And so I sit here tonight disappointed that we don't get to listen to the folks in our community that have overarchingly supported mask wearing in our school.
I would agree with that sentiment entirely. I would say that I interpret the, particularly the follow-up communications with the Department of Education, that it's out of our hands. It's just it's not our decision anymore. It's no longer a local one. And that's unfortunate. I think that it's, and the way they were kind of coy about it, I think, is they were kind of cowardly about it. They really were. I think that needs to be stated. I think that, the public needs to know that. Like, they didn't come out and say, you have to do this, but if you read between the lines, it was basically the next time you meet, you need to change your policies if you require masks in school. I'm more than happy to hear feedback this evening from members of the audience. But I think that we should kind of establish where we're at with this mask, that they understand that, and that might change their comments or ask different kind of questions. And also, but to start that, I go ahead and make a motion that we can no longer require masks to be worn in school. But I see no reason at all why we can't also make it in our policy that we strongly recommend that masks be worn in school, at least in the indoors. That would be my motion. You get that?
So no more discussion.
Yes, sir.
Second.
Go to this and put it in order. Comment towards it.
There it is. I mean, I would like to thank the community at large for supporting the school and the school board and the SAU 9 and the committees that were there, put in place 2 years ago. And we followed their guidance through the last 2 years. None of us were elected to be responsible for the health and well-being. We were here for curriculum and budget. And we formed a committee and worked tirelessly for 2 years to make sure that our community was safe, our kids were safe. And we did an outstanding job, as far as I'm concerned. They did an outstanding job. Our schools were open, we had sports, we were in school, a fabulous job with navigating the whole situation. So I'm just astounded that we did it and we did it so well. Unfortunately, we can't leave the situation as we went into the situation. We are being asked to do what we need to do. But I don't know. I think that's about it. But I'm really glad we had the community efforts that we had, and all of you and your support, as well as the school and the SAU 9. Couldn't have done it without you guys. So thank you. That's it for me. Micah, anything?
No, I just would reiterate what everyone said. I think that this is a tough issue, and I know we have a lot of control on it, and it's always hard to let go of that. But again, as Jerry said, it's out of our hands, and Jackson being up against, state penalties and whatnot is not a situation that we're looking to go into. But we have heard everybody's comments in both directions about the masking, and I think many people were going into this conversation thinking that we could have this dialogue in a public space and that would be what decided this, but it's really awkward that that's actually not the case.
Would we like to make a motion and then entertain? Because I would like people, if they have anything to
We'll
say.
hear from our,
Yeah.
we'll hear from our community.
Yeah. Does anybody would like to say anything or make a comment or?
Jeff Eugenio, 8 Wildflower Lane. I have one second grader and another girl, ninth grader, Kenneth. I just think you should take this opportunity to be happy. I sense some sadness up here, which I don't understand. I think we should be happy we've gotten to this point. I checked the New York Times today for New Hampshire. The 14-day rolling case rate is down 87% since January 18th. I checked the New Hampshire state dashboard. There's 6 hospitals. It classifies in the North Country region. There are 2 people in the hospital, thankfully only for COVID. That's 1 for every 3 hospitals. I think we're in a good spot. And I think we should be happy that we're in a good spot. The masks, on January 16th, the CDC issued some guidance that the cloth masks weren't so good against Omicron, but we won't go into that. But we're in a good spot right now. I think we should be happy we have guidance from the state epidemiologist is on board, the rest of pretty much Western Europe is on board, the rest of the state is on board. And I think it's time that we give the kids back some of what they've been missing for the last couple of years. You know, being masked in distance, 6 feet, there's no way to do chorus, there's no way to do gym with the mask on. We're basically still doing gym with the mask on. There's no way to have lunch. Okay? These kids are the last kids, the last people in the state to be under the restriction, these 8 to 6 kids. And I just think that the numbers where we are, we should trust our vaccine rate. I think the Jackson vaccination rate is 37% or something. Let's just be happy with that, where we are, and keep some of these lives back to the kids. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks. I want to sort of second his comment. Thank you for everything you said. I feel like we have such a tolerant, empathetic, thoughtful community. I think people here in Jackson are very caring and very responsible across the board. I think many people will continue to mask. I will continue to mask. But I do feel a level of discomfort with forcing others to adopt my perspective at this point when the CDC has come out with these guidelines and with our vaccine rate of 93%. I actually did look it up last night. And I think with COVID, it's hard to even understand or fathom the variation in how the precautions have affected different people. People with communication issues, people with speech deficits, people with, I have a student who is partially deaf, and I could feel how happy he was when he didn't have to wear his mask anymore. So I think there's just so much diversity in people's experience. And so I do feel grateful that people who have struggled and suffered more than others because of precautions or just had more collateral damage from precautions, I'm glad that they'll be able to make their own choice. And I really trust people here to be able to do that at this point. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have.
If you could just state your name, we're being live, so.
Sure.
Kathleen.
I want to be on the record. I'm James Glazer. I live here in Jackson. We've lived here for about 12 years. I have 2 kids in Jackson Grammar School. First of all, I want to compliment the board of Jackson Grammar School for having done a great job. How many COVID cases do we have again?
Under 10.
But this week, how many COVID cases do we have?
This week, we
Yeah.
had 0.
We've had 0, yeah. So in medicine, there's a joke that residents kind of tell, and it's sort of a truism about human behavior. And it's kind of about the patient who's put on blood pressure medication and comes back into the office and they've stopped taking their blood pressure medication. You say, well, why'd you stop taking your medicine? And they say, well, my blood pressure is normal now, so I don't need it. And the story is about doing a good job and having the intended benefit and using that as a reason to then stop doing what gave you the good result. And I think the board has done a great job in keeping our kids safe and keeping our kids in school. And I see kids from all over the community, all over the SAU in my office. And I see teachers from the SAU, and I see parents from the SAU. And the major concern that I've heard over the last 2 years is you never have a full classroom because kids are out with COVID, teachers are out with COVID. You can't have an educational experience. And I think that's concerning to people. So I think we've done a good job. I think that we've protected our kids. We've kept them in school where they can benefit from their teachers and their peers. And I'm not sure of how things are going to go if we change that. So I have a couple of questions. I understand that the board feels that their hands are tied. Kevin, I wonder, could you tell us, has the Department of Education defined a date for compliance?
No, they have not.
Has the Department of Education defined penalties for non-compliance?
Their past history has been absolutely, they withhold funding, federal funding, they can withhold different grants.
But in this particular case, have they defined penalties for non-compliance?
No.
So I think, to me, there are some questions about specific implementation issues that have been brought up. There are questions about what the downside for non-compliance is. And so I'd like to respectfully ask the board to consider integrating some of those questions, considering how this new policy would be adopted, and coming back to the community next month with some specific answers to questions that have been raised, some specific plans for implementation, a specific plan to message to our kids how they're going to continue to be safe, despite the fact that for 2 years we've told them that masks are an important part of keeping them safe at school. So I think that it may be the case that we have to implement this, but I think that Jackson has been really courageous and smart and independent in charting its own course to date. And I'd like to ask the board to continue with that independent stance. Do what's right for the community. Let us hear back from you answers to specific questions about implementation before things change for our kids at school. Thank you very much.
So I understand the sentiment. So when we're faced with these kind of decisions and given the information that we were, that's a logical process to go through in your mind, exactly as you pointed out. Like, how long can we get away with not changing our policy? And it really comes down to what happens when a child in school does not wear a mask, and challenges the school on that. And our policy has been to take that child out of the classroom, I believe, at first, and try to get them to wear a mask, bring the parent in to get the child to wear a mask, and then if they don't wear a mask, we remove them from school. If we continue with that policy, if we continue doing that, and those parents complain to the state, challenges to the state, the parents will win, and we'll lose. And so it really comes down to, is that the kind of process that we want to put our community through? To me, that's an ugly process that's probably not healthy for anyone. And that if we kind of just go along with, we recommend that kids wear masks, we ask that they do, but if there's children that don't, then that's where we really can't do anything about that, because how that works in reality, yes, they have to give us a date, so you have to comply by then. When you read the correspondence that's coming from them, they're basically saying it's effective when they made that decision on Wednesday. So that when someone comes in to challenge a mask requirement policy, whoever's challenging that policy will win. In other words, the state will come back and say you have to have that child in school, and you have to respect the fact that they're not going to wear that mask. Above and beyond, when you read their recommendations, they're really saying that the children that don't want to be wearing masks should not be wearing them. That's what they're saying. And the frustration part on my end is that that's no longer a local decision. I would have liked to have come a week, maybe 2 weeks past February vacation without changing our policy, or really seeing where the number was in the community spread was supposed to be, where it was supposed to be at when we went down to green and could remove masks. But that's again where the state removed that choice from us. So yes, we could continue with our policy and require that students wear masks and continue to do what we're doing right now with it. But if we do that and it's challenged, we'll lose. And I'm concerned about the kind of division and anger that will create in our community. So that's why I'm of the mind that we should change our policy now.
I'm just going to interject. We were Thursday. The other schools in the district dropped their policies Monday. I'm just going to ask Kevin if he has heard of anybody else in the community from the other schools, the other grammar schools, if they've had any issues one way or another, or.
Yeah. So if I might, just a couple things. Yeah. The numbers have dropped as precipitously as they rose in January. So that's a good thing. Monday, I will say, was a kind of a feeling out process for a lot of people. I think that it created a lot of joy, as Mr. Eugenio had said, but I think it created some angst on other people, both staff and students. The positive part is I have not heard any negatives regarding people making comments to personal choice, whether people wore masks or not. We had a variety of of participation with masks. Some schools were 90% without masks. Other schools were more 40 to 50%. I would imagine that has evolved over the past week. And I think that people are getting used to the process now. So as far as transitioning, and the students, I will say, have been pretty resilient. You know, the older kids, the high school kids, I think they were absolutely very, very happy to most of the kids. And then the other kids that chose to wear masks are continuing to do so. Elementary school kids, you know, a lot of them, from what I've seen and talking with the principals, kids just, it's more of a habit now that they're wearing them, and they will continue to wear them as they have, even outdoors. So I haven't heard any negative pitfalls from either parents, staff, or students at this point. And trust me, I've received a lot of communication over the past 2 years regarding it.
Thank you. So I just wanted to get a little bit of our own local news. Anybody else have anything they would like to add?
I just had a quick kind of comment question. Was just that I know you're saying about division among here, but I just wonder what we could do now that we are going to move forward in this direction. Just thinking about the children, because you know they don't necessarily can't comprehend what the percentage of things is and how many people are in a hospital bed, but they can understand that some of their peers aren't wearing masks, and just that impact it makes on them to feel uncomfortable if maybe their families want them to or don't want to, just that social component. I just wondered if we would have kind of a plan in place at school to just make that transition or support them. For instance, I mean, I'm saying my child's not vaccinated, and he came home one day with a story, you know, that someone else, are you vaccinated? He said, no, and they started backing away from him, you know? And so just that, you know, inevitably it happens, obviously, but I just wonder if we could come up with a nice way to transition for them.
If I may, we met Tuesday, and then I spoke with Victoria, our guidance counselor, yesterday. So we were waiting for the decision of the board before we moved forward, but Victoria will be talking briefly with each class. Basically, this is an adult decision that's been made, and so children have the option to wear one or not, and just like in our school pledge, we respect each other. We don't say anything to people about their hair or their clothing. It's just part of our school philosophy and community to take care of each other, and everybody is different. And it's not their decision, it's an adult decision. So that part of it, I'm not worried about kids speaking to each other, but if they do, they should speak up, and we'll make sure that the kids understand that. And the other piece was that even though we won't be masking, we won't be dropping every protocol all of a sudden tomorrow, so we'll still be doing as much outdoors as we can. We'll still maintain some spacing, and then gradually, as the rates continue to decline and don't increase, then we'll roll out a few more until we can hopefully get back to, as Jeff said, it should be a joyful. There are so many things that were our school, our Jackson School, that we missed in the last 2 years. You know, the community, the families coming together, the cookouts, the concerts, all of those many things that we, in my mind, lost, that I'm anxious to try to get us back to, but also safely. We'll continue to SAS test as well. So that's still an option for those who haven't even signed up. You can still sign up for next week if you choose to do that. So we'll continue, and take small steps. It's not an everything all at once decision. Thank you.
Today, obviously we've been talking about this for a very long time. Board, we've been talking about this as individuals, as parents, as educators, as community members, as business owners. One of the things that I find really kind of alarming is that the rate in which we have shifted here from a really thoughtful, really planned out, if this, then that. And essentially, for us tonight, we're saying, if this, then that. Yeah, we're just moving forward. This is it. That feels kind of disheartening and uncomfortable for me as a parent. I'm not very excited that I can't say, hey, if in this condition, you know, and in this instance in my child's classroom, what happens now? And it's essentially, I believe, we just keep moving forward and nothing happens now and we've dropped our masks. And so I'm not super comfortable with that. I'm disappointed by it. And I wish that this had all happened at a little bit more of a thoughtful rate instead of just it's time. Because, you know, Mr. Eugenio, when I look at the New York Times today, I see those same numbers and I think, wow, our community is when last winter when we were at the worst place of last year, that's where our community is now. Those numbers, those graphs look a lot like they did in the peak of where we were last year. And the numbers are dropping really quickly, and that feels exciting and good to get back to a place like we were in last June as a community. We all kind of stripped our masks off and, you know, did the work and the things that we love to do for a little window of time. And I don't feel like right now feels like it did last June, and that feels disappointing. But as we kind of have to be in this position where our hands are tied and we move forward and we say, just like the rest of the community, our kids can, and our educators and folks can mask in an optional way in the building regardless. I would really hope that based on the kinds of integrity of this community, that in the numbers that we just asked about, so 10 adults and 23 children that got tested on Wednesday for the SAS testing, I would really, really hope that anybody who is eligible, who has not had COVID, that can participate, that is not part of those numbers, I hope that those people sign up and participate on Wednesdays. For all the other community members who really wish that we were still masking, who really wish and want to believe that our really fine and high vaccination rate at the top of New Hampshire, as vaccination goes. I hope that more people show up and get tested and prove that those vaccinations are working and our personal kind of mitigation practices are intact to keep our entire school healthy.
Anyone else like to say anything? Yes, if you could just name.
All right, Allison Varand, Jackson. I just have a question about the SAS testing. Do we know how long that's going to continue? Is that continuing to the school year, or is it going to end at one point?
We'll continue it as long as people are interested in participating in it.
Oh.
Our contract goes at least through the end of the school year.
Okay.
It's only available for students and staff, so
Okay.
it's not available to all
Right.
community members.
Thank you. Okay. Good.
Anyone else have anything, comments, or before we make a motion?
We made the motion.
Yeah.
We did voting. I'd just like to reflect back on what Gail said, which is, you know, I think that the kids are in good hands, and we're at where we're at, and hopefully moving forward things will work out positively, but you know, time will tell. It's, you know, adults can have the division and the community, like at that level have the division, but it's important to support the kids, and I think that Gail and the staff here is going to have the kids in good hands. We'll all move forward positively.
Jen, I want to add one thing. I think that what we all have to recognize in this is that we don't know what's going to come next. And just as we don't know if this is going to continue to drop, which is what we want, which is what we want to be in celebration of, it could go the other way. And I think that just because this is this decision now doesn't mean that this is the permanent decision. And it doesn't mean that the state isn't also going to make another decision. There's nothing that's been as closely watched as what's happening with COVID in the past 2 years, right? So I think that at a certain level, because we have to make that decision, we can also believe that if there is a shift in the other direction, that there will be corresponding policies that make that shift. So I think that while that might be obvious, I think it's nice to articulate that, because we're not saying universally, we're never going back there. We're saying at this moment in time, this is a decision that, you know, we need to make, and this is a decision that as a board that, you know, we're going to choose to get behind, as opposed to, you know, jeopardize the health, or health is maybe the wrong word, to jeopardize the well-being and governance of our school.
I mean, we certainly have learned a lot, and if another pandemic, God forbid, comes our way, I think we have many more tools in our arsenal and people of expertise to help us move more quickly. So I'm not concerned about that.
I have one comment. I was very much sort of trying to figure out where I felt about this the last few days and reaching out to friends and I was thinking that same thing. Well, it is just that it's fluid, so we can always change, the state can always change. But also, I called a friend in Ireland, I called a friend in Brazil, because I knew that their schools had unmasked, further, back in time than us. And it was just really, it's interesting with the pandemic that you can actually look at so many different cultures, so many different places in the world, how they've handled it differently. And at the child in Brazil, they've been unmasked for a while, and they haven't, had any issues with an increase in case rise. And it's just one tiny example. It's not data. That's just one subjective. I just thought it would be interesting to reach out. And interestingly, in the public school outside Dublin that a friend's child goes to, they never had children 12 under mask because they were valuing they took a different approach. And I do think there are so many different ways of looking at this, and COVID is like, it's an illness in our society, but our society has so many illnesses. And we are like a person is holistic. If you just focus on one illness and you forget, you can create problems in other parts of the organism. And I think our society is like that too. And I feel like that is why the CDC has made this change, because they want to treat our society in a very holistic way and think about, all of the illnesses, the mental illness, the other physical illnesses, financial difficulties, just everything that has come with COVID, and all of the issues that have arisen. I do feel like this is a balanced approach. And it was just very interesting to hear the perspectives of people in different parts of the world who are also dealing with this hard decision-making, hard conversations. So it's always reassuring to me that that we're not alone and that we can kind of learn a lot from so many different perspectives.
Thank you. That was interesting. Thank you. All right.
That was all those in favor.
All those in favor?
Opposed?
Abstained?
Abstained?
Did you get that?
I can't see one.
301.
Abstained.
Kate abstained.
Thank you, guys.
Can I get a clarification on the vote? I didn't hear it, sorry.
I'm sorry, what? On the motion?
Just a clarification on the vote, it was 301,
301, yeah.
not 310.
Yeah, and the motion was to change our policy for requiring masks, making a strong recommendation that everyone in the building still wear a mask.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody. Yeah?
So you may notice up here on the front of the stage, there are some displays that our 5-6 class has recently done. It was an integrated unit on Japan and Japanese culture. They had Jeff Fournier come in and cook some Japanese. They had a Japanese feast here. They've investigated the culture. Lauren Reeder led them in learning about the pentatonic scale, which I learned today is different than ours. I didn't know that. That's why the music sounds different. And then every child composed a song using that scale, and they each played each other's songs. It was really, really cool. So in between meetings, you might have some time to take a look at, they each focused on different aspects of Japanese culture that they were interested in and did some research, did an oral presentation along with these boards. So do check those out. Thank you. Next month, Mrs. Weeder's going to do a presentation on our music program. So while everybody's here, please come by and hear her give us some information about that.
Thank you, Ms. Weeder. Every month at our school board meeting, Gail has put a lot of effort, as has the entire staff of the grammar school, to really participate in these meetings by having someone come every time and present something super cool. We love it, but it's not just for us. I know that for me, I love when people attend our meetings and participate, and I know it's a really hard time for everybody with young children to come to these meetings, but those presentations are wonderful, and it's really nice to have folks here participating with us. That's all. It's my plug.
And as a note to that, there's been a move for, we used to have childcare at school board meetings, and that was set up by the PTO for this meeting, and there's, interest in continuing that so that we can support more people to come to the meetings. We'd love to have it. We're really fun.
And I need to recognize one more individual I see sitting here. Our new world language teacher, Erica, did some work with the sixth graders on some Japanese language as well.
Thank you. Yep.
So every time we've had one of these presentations at our meetings, I've really learned something pretty interesting in these. It's kind of fun in that regard. And tonight, for instance, I didn't know that the pentatonic scale came from Japanese music. But for any Grateful Dead fans out there, they play in the pentatonic scale in a lot of their songs.
See, we're fun. There you go. Jerry goes free. Thank you, Gail. Anything else?
No.
All right. So committee reports. We do not have a policy meeting this month. We have one next month. But any other? I'm going to add on to those points. Board discussion. Next date for our meeting is April 18th. So again, following Kate, if you'd like to come for a little entertainment and more knowledge, just feel free to join us for our next meeting.
And that'll be a reorganization.
And the reorganization. We also have a goal-setting session set for May 31st from 1 to 3, which will be a board working session. And then also, we have met with the selectmen, board, person, thank you. Barbara Campbell has met with us. And we wanted to just go over that based on the school and what we're looking at doing with the school and what the town is looking at doing with the fire station and those things coming to a head, we have finally reached out to each other to say what can we do from a community perspective, where do we need to start looking at things. So we had a really nice meeting the other morning. I know the town, and Barbara can speak more to this, is going to have a warrant article for $25,000 to form the facilities committee to explore the needs of the town buildings and facilities. And we would also like to include not just the facilities and the buildings, but we're actually going to take a step back from that, cast our net a little bit wider out to the community for those that are interested in helping us explore what are our needs for the community, what are our perceived needs and wants for the community at large, and where are we now, and what our needs are, and where we might be in 10 years or 20 years from now, so that we can look in conjunction with the properties that we have, the buildings we have, take into account the needs that we have from the community, and really put forth something we need, so that the voters can say this is what we really need, instead of just having a few. So you'll be getting that information if you attend the town meeting, vote for that on the warrant article as well. And then also be aware that this is going to go out probably in e-news, and you'll be contacting Barbara or myself or anybody that you are interested in this, or if you have a friend that you think would be really good on this committee, throw them under the bus. So we really want to get some new people in town. We have an amazing community, extremely smart people live here, and they're well diverse, and it would be lovely to have more people do this work with us. So really looking forward to having this go forward. So Barbara, did you want to add anything?
Just I'm really excited about the committee and starting to communicate instead of having separate meetings with the select board and the school board, having a joint communication that, by the way, we're doing this and you're doing that, so one hand knows what's talking to the other hand. And again, Jen said, we have an amazing community. We need to figure out what the needs of the community are, listen to the people, and bring it together and come up with current and future plans. So, thanks, Jen.
Yes. And I know Tish is going to be first on that committee, so thank you, Tish.
Here comes the bus.
Did you just throw me under the bus?
In front of everyone.
At that meeting, it was Barbara, Jen, and I at that meeting, and Barbara had brought up the idea that we kind of need a fact sheet, a FAQ, if you will, because so many times questions come up. What are we going to do with the grazing garage? What are we going to do with the basement? What are we going to do with the upstairs of the school? And we've spent a lot of years answering all those questions already, but they come up all the time. So it'd be nice to kind of put together that kind of FAQ of what's out there already. But one of the things that we really hope comes out is we'd really like to engage the whole town of Jackson. The voters and business people, second homeowners, and really get feedback from the whole community about the direction that the town should be moving in. So we're really hoping to achieve that moving forward the next year or so, because on most of these issues, I mean, we've been working really hard for 3 or 4 years now on all of these things. And we have a lot of answers already, but we haven't done the best job of getting out to the community and really kind of understanding what the community wants from these things, so that by the time we come to make decisions, they're easier to make. And I know COVID's been the biggest reason why it's been really hard and challenging to do that. Hopefully, the numbers will continue to go where they are, and we can, sometime over the summer or over the next fall when it makes sense, have some community meetings where people can come in and express their concern and have questions and answers and things like that.
So, any other citizen comments at this time? We have no non-public, so we're moving on to adjourn. All in favor? Thank you guys very much. We have a few minutes break before we start our 7 o'clock annual meeting.